Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to sit down and have a conversation about all things spearfishing.
I'm happy to be here, man. I'm excited. I do
Yeah, man.
appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really cool to be able to talk with you because just watching your YouTube channel, you can tell that you have dedicated your life to the profession, and you show like a level of commitment to the resource and to the safety aspect, the environment, the fish itself. You show a lot of characteristics that a lot of other people don't even take the time to think about, let alone publicly display it for everyone else to see. So it is an honor to be able to sit down and talk with you, man. Thank you again.
I appreciate that. It's one of those things that just kind of consumed me. I think when you find what it is that you really love, you don't really have a choice. So I wish I said I had this master plan, but it really consumed me, if I'm being honest.
So what drew you into spearfishing to begin with?
So I spent a lot of time in and on the water as a kid with my dad. He kind of is the one that introduced me to the ocean and my love for it. When we were younger, we spent a lot of time coming down to the Keys and lobstering and stuff like that. Fort Pierce, Stewart, pretty much all of South Florida. I grew up in a place called Titusville. We fished out of a place called Port Canaveral. We mainly did a lot of hook and line fishing, and I did that most of my childhood. And when I turned, I think it was 18 or 19. I kind of went through that cool phase where you're like 15 to 17. You think you're too cool for your parents and all the stuff you used to do, and I got out of fishing a little bit and I didn't do it as much. And then when I got back into it around just out of high school, I saw a video. I think it was like Cameron Kirkconnell or one of those guys, something. I saw one of them spear a wahoo and it just absolutely blew my mind. And I was like, I didn't even know people could do that. Um, and it kind of just got the wheels turning. And where I wasn't really ideal for spearfishing, but I actually built my first spear gun myself because I couldn't afford to buy one new. And I started spearing like the intercoastals, the Indian River, where I grew up. It's crazy murky water, and all it took was spearing one fish, and it just lit the fire. And we did it when we were younger, but it was pole spears, and it just felt different for some reason. When I got older, I was more aware of what was going on and how primitive and awesome it felt just to do it. And I think that's what really lit the fire, and kind of the rest was history after that.
What were the first fish that you were chasing in your river system?
So it was mainly sheep's head was pretty much the only thing you could find that was legal at the time. If you found like a legal mangrove snapper, you were amped. Like I remember one day I got two, and I thought it was the greatest day ever. Because the average fish was like 8 or 9 inches, and on occasion you'd get a couple 10 to 12 inches come through that were decent enough. But for the most part, it was sheep's head, and then moved on to mangroves.
What kind of water depth were you spearfishing at that time?
On average, it wasn't very deep. It was only, I mean, a lot of the bridges, the deepest would be 15 feet. The most challenging part was the visibility. If you're not familiar with the Indian River, it looks like hot chocolate. Pretty much what I would do is I'd find a piling or something that I could crawl down because it was terrifying to swim straight down. Get to the bottom, and I would look up at the sun, and you could see the shadows of the fish and the silhouettes, and you'd shoot those. Try to find one big enough, and hope you hit it right.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to our first spearfishing stories. We would go to Oregon Inlet, North Carolina. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but same exact thing. We'd swim down the pilings. You get down there and you look up, and there's just flashes of hundreds of thousands of sheep's heads. So that sounds very similar. So the progression was you learned how to hold your breath for what 30 seconds at that point to a minute.
So it, I kind of naturally adopted the free dive side of it. I remember when we were young and we'd come to the Keys, me and my two older brothers, we would see who could swim down to the bottom and grab sand. And I remember we were 10, 12 years old, and we were going down to 50, 60 feet like it was nothing. And we all grew up surfing, which, if you're not familiar, really conditions you to be able to hold your breath. You don't really have a choice, you have to. And then I swam competitively a little bit in high school. So I think that helped a lot, the cardio and then the surfing. I think the free diving side of it kind of came naturally. And not that I'm just this competitive level free diver. There's free divers out there that hold their breath 5, 6 minutes, but it gave me enough of a foundation to be able to operate at depths. And I think when I first started to seriously get into free diving, I was already averaging, I think, 60, 70 feet, kind of off rip.
Yeah, that's not normal. I need you to understand that.
Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah, now you put me in 30 feet, and like if I can get down to the bottom, it's just special. And that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I don't want people to take for granted, but I need people to understand that swimming down to 80 feet and then staying down there is an incredible physical task to do so. So what was the transition from these rivers out into the open ocean?
So I didn't have a boat at the time. I take that back. I had a little 16-foot Ginu, and I was running that around the intercoastals. And a lot of times I did shore dives. I'd just drive my truck to a bridge we could park under and swim out. And I was doing it alone, which looking back, it was probably the dumbest thing I ever did. When I had really calm days, I'd take my little boat out, but a lot of times I would try and piggyback off of other people's boats. I'd hop on with my brother or my dad, but they mainly wanted to rod and reel fish. So here and there, they'd let me jump in. And quite honestly, I spent a lot of time just not shooting anything. I was just getting out on the water, free diving. Um, and where it really turned was when I decided to move to Key West because it's kind of one of the meccas of free diving in the U.S., in my opinion. And that kind of opened the doors. But the transition wasn't really slow. It was abrupt from intercoastal to moving to Key West. And then once I got here, I dove every day for months, and it was pretty intense, and I learned a lot in a very short time.
Well, just after our few minutes of conversation, I'm guessing that you probably pushed that Ginu to the limit too, didn't
Yeah, I've got photos of me doing stuff in that thing. No one should probably do.
you? What kind of I've never been down there, so I don't understand the distance from shore. But what type of mileage do you have to go to get to these spots where you can spearfish with a Ginu?
So the Keys, there's a lot of opportunity even inshore. I mean, your average run, if you depending where you're putting in, it's less than 5, 6 miles. But there were days that I would put extra gas tanks in, and I was running 25, 30 miles. Not necessarily straight offshore, but down away from the Keys and in the backcountry and on the Gulf side, Atlantic side. Just trying to hit the right weather window because that boat's not really built for any kind of swell or chop. But there were days that I probably pushed it a little farther than I should, and it's a part of exploring, and it was exciting, and I don't have any regrets as far as doing it. But I never really was unsafe with it. I always, had a plan if something were to go wrong. But I mean, there were some days I had that thing 15, 16 miles from any point of land at some points. It was pretty wild.
And did you have like a handheld radio so that you could reach out if you had any
Yeah,
issues or
yeah,
anything?
I had the handheld, those little, I can't forget what they're called, the little GPS where you can send out text, and then I had a handheld VHF that has the distress on it, and I had everything I should have had, but um, it still was a little,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Well, so if you're 15, 16 miles out, what kind of water depth is it down there?
Um, so if you're straight out, you're in really deep water. But the odd thing about Key West is not only do we have the Gulf and the Atlantic, you can go west, and there's nothing down there except for remote islands that are uninhabited. So it doesn't necessarily mean I was deep. I mean, on average, I was between 30 and 60 feet. But the Keys are so odd as far as like the bathymetry, the depth changes based on where you are. I can be 6 miles out in some spots and be in 150. I can be 40 miles out in one direction and still be in 25 feet of water. So I think the deepest I ever dove out of it was probably 60, 70 feet on the edge of the reef. I never did any blue water stuff with it, which is still kind of on the bucket list. I'd like to shoot a wahoo out of it. It'd be pretty cool.
There's your viral video right there. You knew
Yeah, right.
Wahoo. I'm sure you'll figure out a way to do it.
No, I will.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that has been a challenge for me moving to Wilmington was just learning a new fishery. How did you go about targeting spots that are specifically designed for a certain fish that you were chasing?
So I'll be honest with you, a lot of it was just guessing. I did meet a few locals that kind of helped me out and point me in the right direction, but for the most part, a lot of it was just okay. I searched this spot yesterday. here. I'm going to start on the end of where I ended and then work this and just keep going. And I never really had anything I was trying to accomplish or a specific species I was trying to target. I was trying to learn the fishery and the bottom and everything as a whole. So it was never, I want to figure this out, as I want to figure it all out. I want to cover everything that I can. I want to cover as much ground as I can. And I literally spent probably 3 months. Every day I was allowed to get out, I was out for probably about 3, 4 months straight. It was pretty awesome.
In order for the water to get pretty clear up here on shore in North Carolina, we have to have like a period of days where there's no wind really, and then you got to time your tide right. There's a major difference between high and low here. How does tide play into you exploring these areas to learn if this is going to be an efficient spot?
So it's all situational, obviously, and the strangest thing about the tides here is pretty much everywhere on the planet, obviously, except for islands, like Port Canaveral, where I grew up, North Carolina, where you are, everywhere on the Gulf, the tide comes in, it pushes against land, and then it turns around and comes back out. So here, we're an island, the tide comes by, goes up, and then back this way, and then it does the same thing again. So the tides are really hard to predict, and it kind of depends on which side of the island you're on. At the time, I wasn't really focusing on them, but it does. The biggest thing here is when the wind blows, the shallows murk up. So you want to hit the tide going the opposite direction of the area you want to dive because it'll take all that dirty water with it. And like I said, instead of being one tide, it goes by twice because we're an island and there's nowhere for the water to actually stop. Um, to this day, I swear I don't completely understand the tides here still. Some days when I think I know what's going on, I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. But yeah, I didn't focus on it too much. Honestly, it was more so just like I said, getting out there and covering as much as I could.
Yeah, yeah, and if you take tide out of the equation and you add in the current, I feel like one of the major draws for you guys is your access to the stream.
Yeah.
What kind of distance do you have to go off in order to get into that?
So that fluctuates so much, it's actually impressive. Some days I can run 6 miles to the reef, and the Gulf Stream is right on the edge. It's 150 foot of blue water, 4 knots of current ripping, which it's almost impossible to dive in unless you're doing wahoo. And then some days it'll be 35, 40 miles off of Key West. It really is impressive how that mass of water almost has a brain to where it just kind of moves as it wants to. And there are factors that affect it, obviously the moons and the winds and whatnot, but it really fluctuates quite a bit. Some days it's like I said, right up against the reef. Some days you can't even get to it. It's so close to Cuba.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know that we this time of year it can come in like at the closest 40 miles, but most of the time it's closer to 60 to 70.
Yeah, that's
So
wild. I mean, there are some days where it's actually on top of the reef and like 30 feet, and you can literally watch it like kind of rub up against the islands. It's pretty wild.
yeah, that is really cool. So you at this point you're fishing out of your gnu. You've made your move. You're ready to commit to getting a bigger boat. What was the transition like for you to get a bigger boat?
Um, it was definitely difficult. Obviously, financially was the biggest issue because down here is so expensive. If you're not familiar, Key West is probably one of the highest rent rates, I think, in the U.S. It's definitely top five or so. The biggest thing was getting out of that vacation mindset and just diving every day and trying to get back to work, find a job that I could afford to pay for all this stuff. And I never really, it kind of happened on accident. I never really had this intention of getting a bigger boat to start a charter business. In my head, I was like, well, I'm going to get a little bit bigger boat. And then I was like, well, maybe if I run one or two charters a week, I could pay for the bigger boat. So it kind of all just kind of happened on accident. And again, I wish I had this grand scheme, but sometimes I guess the best things happen on accident.
Yeah, yeah, that's
The,
a challenge, man. You look at a 30-foot contender nowadays, it's like 200-300 grand.
it's unbelievable. So I really lucked out with the timing of the one I bought. I had the Gnu. I actually bought a Sea Hunt. It was 21. I had that for maybe a year and a half. And then around that time was when I decided, hey, if I can run charters, I can pay for my boat and the fuel because quite honestly, I couldn't even afford to take myself out. I was diving so much. So that was kind of the push for that. And when I was shopping contenders, it was about a year and a half before the boom. So my boat is a 27, technically a 30. It had pretty much brand new motors on it. It's a 2004, and I paid 65,000 for it. And I think 2.5, 3 years later, even today, I could probably sell it for over 100 grand, no problem. And I put that many hours and miles on it, and I really lucked out with the market on that. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, now you can't even get the 21 Sea Hunt for 65.
Yeah, right. You ain't
I mean,
lying.
really?
I think I paid for the Sea Hunt. I paid like 20 grand, maybe not even that. It may have been like 15 at the time. But yeah, I got really lucky with the boat market as far as that goes.
Yeah, that is lucky because that I mean that's make or break right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with the this is one question I've had for myself is do you have to have the grouper snapper permit since you are commercial?
So to do the commercial side of things and sell, yes. And I don't actually own it; I lease it. Um, Along with everything else, the price of those went up when boats and all the anything on the commercial side and charter side went up. I think when I moved down here, you could get one for about 60 or 70,000. That's the buy. To lease one, it's typically about 10% of the price of the permit to buy. Right now, I think the grouper snappers, just to give you an idea of how things have gone, I think they're over 115 or 120 now to buy a new one. So I lease mine. I have a 225, which means it's not the unlimited grouper snapper. It's I can have 225 pounds a trip. Um, but yeah, it's that and a lot of other permits that go along with it. You need a PhD to understand it all, quite honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, and my point in asking these is just I want people to understand that there's so much that goes into doing what you do,
Yeah,
and it's just from the monetary side of things. That's what makes it a challenge to be able to be in a position to do that. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially on the commercial side of things. I've recently have started to kind of nudge towards the charter side of things more because the YouTube and everything's helping it stay busy. But the commercial side of things, I have so much respect for those guys that do it year round. I think at most I was doing 20, 30 commercial trips a year, maybe. But there's guys that's all they do, and it is such a volatile career. I mean, some days you go out and all you do is spend and lose money all day, and that's the reality of it. Not a lot of people realize it.
so when you got your boat, you said I'm gonna charter for a couple of days a week to help just offset the costs on everything. Uh, how did you go about getting clients out the gate?
The biggest thing that I did from the very beginning, and a lot of it was they were asking me for trips before I actually started offering them. So that's kind of what nudged me. I was like, hey, I'm getting a decent amount of messages of people asking if I do run charters because I was real big on Instagram. I was making little short videos and kind of posting them and all that. And social media is kind of a double edged sword because a guy like me, I kind of like my quiet and I kind of like to left alone and do my own thing. But at the same time, it's an amazing resource when it comes to free advertising and all that. So I really hit social media hard when I started and just posting day to day videos and photos of what we were catching. And it's kind of a great thing because it gets out to the people that want to see that stuff, and it kind of organically happened that way. I never actually paid commissions. I never actually had an SEO expert or whatever they do on your website and all that stuff. I kind of did it the long hard way, but it ended up working better because I didn't pay all these commissions and advertisements and stuff. And it started slow as a trickle, and just like anything, the more time I put in, the better it got over time.
And were you doing primarily spearfishing at that point, or was it rod and reel combos? Or
I was doing both. Not a lot of people know this. I've actually been fishing a heck of a lot longer than I've been spearfishing. I've been fishing my entire life. Modern day free diving, what we call, I've been only doing for 14 years compared to literally my entire life. So I was doing both. Um, and I like doing both because it keeps it fresh for me. It's not the same thing every day. And I just recently started, actually August 1st, I announced I'm only going to be doing spearfishing from now on. And it's not that I don't like fishing anymore. I was doing too much. I was spreading myself too thin. Having to outfit the boat with different gear every single other day was just kind of wearing on me. And I'd rather focus on just one thing and be really, really, really good and proficient at that. But I did it for a while, but now I'm officially only doing spearfishing and actually sword fishing because that's kind of its own thing. But um, yeah, it kind of came back full circle there.
Okay, that's really cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, yeah. I can see that being an issue just from the standpoint of preparing every morning at 4 in the morning to try to get your boat ready. Like
Yeah,
that would be a major
switching
challenge.
out sets of gear is just it was too much.
Yeah, another thing that you don't think about until you're doing it, but if you're trying to transition from one to the other, it's kind of hard to stay on the fish because you aren't technically chasing that same style fish.
Yep,
So
that was another reason for it. And if I stay on top of spearfishing, I'm more worried about visibility and what's going on the bottom than the actual bite itself. So I think it'll be for the best.
yeah. Well, now if you're transitioning into full time spearing, are you seeing a lot of clients that have the same level of experience, or are you seeing a lot of newcomers that are interested in getting into it?
So there is a huge wave of newcomers, just with everything social media and YouTube and all that stuff in general. Not just mine, everyone's worldwide. I think it's bringing a lot more exposure to it. So naturally, there's a lot more people that are curious and just want to come out and try it. And I'd say at the beginning, probably 70%, 70, 80% of my clients were very experienced. They were 50, 60 foot divers. And I'd say today, I probably half of them are beginners that have almost never even tried it, and they just want to get in the water and kind of check something off the list. A lot of my people are hunters, land based, whether it's archery or rifle or whatever it may be, duck hunters and all that stuff. A lot of them are just looking for the new thing to try and check off and try something different. And it's a very primitive, personal feeling, and it does scratch that itch if you are a hunter. It's just there's a lot more challenges that come into play. They kind of forget that they have to hold their breath and swim and stay and be buoyant and kind of be quiet all at the same time, but still line up and shoot a fish. So, yeah, long-winded. I'm seeing a lot of beginners nowadays.
Yeah. Well, if you and this is just curiosity myself, if you take somebody that's new and they want to go out and dive, what type of water depth are you taking someone that doesn't have a whole lot of experience, or if any?
So if it's their very first time, obviously I talk to them. Have they snorkeled before? Have they done any scuba? How do you feel as far as breath hold wise? On average, I'm going to take that person if they don't really have a good baseline for me. I'm going to take them to about 10 feet of water, see what they can do from there, see how they behave, how they react. Some people can't even. Some people can hold their breath for a minute. They 10 feet of water is still too much, just because there's so much going on. So that's kind of my baseline. And after that, I can read people pretty well. It doesn't take me longer than about 30 minutes to figure out whether, hey, we've got some more opportunity to go deeper or we're going to be in the kiddie pool today.
Mm-hmm. How many trips do you think you need with somebody to get them diving 60 feet?
If they have the ability, they just don't have the training, I could probably get someone to 60 feet in a day. Now, are they going to be laying on the bottom and 60 ripping black groupers out of holes? Probably not, but I could get them to that depth. If they're physically obviously there, um, mental is a huge thing because there's a lot of mental stability that you need to be able to dive and go down there and feel confident and not have a panic attack and freak out and dump all your air and all of that. But if the person is, again, very situational, but if they're kind of what we would consider your average free diver, like physicality wise, I can get most people to about 50, 60 feet in a day. That's not a guarantee.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We would take it and apply it to a person specifically.
Yeah.
So when you, I feel like when I started watching your channel, it's been years, but uh, it was more like you had really successful days. It's like bang, bang, smacking fish,
Yeah.
and it's almost like it was all of the success. And now I feel like your channel is more like I want to be real with you in portraying what I do. I feel like you've made a point to do that. But
Yeah.
realistically, how long are you spending down at the bottom in order to get the shot on these fish that you're seeing?
So typically, I'm not going to be down there. Like, say, we'll use 60 feet as a baseline. My average 60-foot dive is probably from leaving the surface to returning to the surface is probably a minute 20, minute 30. Your descent is obviously a little bit quicker. Your descent's only 12, 15 seconds. And then your ascent is depending if you have a fish or not, it slows you down a little, 20, 25 seconds, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So I mean, realistically, I'm down on there working for 45 seconds or so, maybe sometimes a minute if I want to push it. But on average, anywhere between that 30 to 50-second range. And sometimes you land right on top of the fish, so you just shoot it and go. You don't really have to spend a lot of time searching or working or whatnot. But um, yeah, that's probably my average dive.
So what is your static on land if you're spending that much time physically moving around?
I've never I've never done like a lay there and try to max out static. We tinkered with it one day, but didn't really do it like you're supposed to in like a free dive course. I think the best I ever did was probably 4:15 maybe.
Yeah, that's pretty long. Yeah. So that leads me to the next question of how often are you feeling the convulsions when you're diving? Like your body's telling you, okay, it's time.
So that's something that I never really push it. And I don't know if either I don't push it or if it doesn't kick in as early for me. It's very rarely I will feel, it's very rare that I will feel them. On occasion, it's 10 seconds before I hit the surface on my way up. I see a lot of divers that get them, um, we call them contractions. They get them, some of them get them 30 seconds into their dive. But it's not something, I don't know, again, I don't know if maybe I'm not pushing myself farther than I should be. Realistically, I've done, if I really take my time and breathe up, I've done 2-minute dives, 220 at 70 feet. Not a huge fan of it. There's not a lot I need to be doing down there for that long. If I can get it done in a shorter dive, I prefer to do that. I want to come home to my family, obviously. Um, but it's not rare that I get them. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. I think that's because of you've mastered the anxiety of what you're doing. I think
Yeah,
that plays a lot into it.
I think that's a big thing. And it just comes with time in the water. Your average free diver is, even if they're pretty active, they're diving 4 or 5 times a month. I mean, that's my average week. I'm in the water probably at least 4 or 5 times a week. So that, just like anything, the more time you spend doing it, of course, I'm going to be a little more comfortable.
Yeah. What would be your best advice for somebody that is trying to get to where they can dive down 60 feet?
If you have the availability, try and take a course. The level one course is mainly safety, but they will, as long as there are no um, extreme circumstances, for the most part, they can guarantee to get you to 66 feet. That's kind of the standard of the level one course. The level two course is where you actually start to learn a lot as far as breathing and techniques and all that stuff and getting to deeper depths. But I'm a big fan of education, whether you want to do it the hard way and learn on your own. I'm a self-taught. I've never taken any classes. It just takes you a lot longer. But if you're looking to get into it, you want to do it the right way, get educated, I recommend taking a free diving course if you can.
Yeah, that that's great advice. Just because there's so much that goes into it that you don't think about, and you wouldn't even have anyone there in front of you if you didn't try to make that first step to figure out what you're doing before you get in the water.
Oh,
That makes a lot of
absolutely.
sense.
And it's just the expedited version. Like I said, you can learn it on your own. It's going to take a lot longer.
Hmm. So I want to jump to actual spearfishing from your perspective. When you have a spot in mind, say you want to go out 20 miles today to this ledge or rock formation, how are you approaching the specific spot once you're in the water? Are you going straight down over top of it? Or are you trying to approach from an angle? How are you approaching
So,
the fish?
so it depends on the spot, depends on the fish. On average, if I'm diving the reef, it's going to either be snapper or grouper. Now, ledgy spots are going to be a lot different than what we call hard bottom or what I call Swiss cheese, thick bottom. The hard bottom, thick stuff, I'm going to probably chum because there's more likely the fish are going to come out, and I'm dive bombing on them. I want to come straight down on them. A lot of times, if it's in the middle of the day, you want the sun at your back, you look like a silhouette. That's a little trick that some of us do that I don't think a lot of people have talked about. Now, if I'm working ledges, it's a lot different because more often than not, the fish is going to be shacked up in the ledge, and it's not as specific as the approach. If the fish is aware of you, you kind of need to be. But Ledges, I'm coming on one end, I'm working down it with my flashlight ready to rip. Those other spots, I'm literally dive bombing straight down, just trying to land right on top of them and get a window before they take off and decide to rock up or whatnot. I hate being vague, but there's so many factors that kind of determine on what kind of drop it's going to be.
Well, no, that makes sense because you probably only get a couple dives before the fish are all aware that you're there, anyways, right?
No, absolutely. If that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I'm assuming you probably hit 20, 30 spots in a day, then, right?
Yeah, we cover quite a bit of ground, and it depends on the style of spots. But I mean, my average day, at least, depending on how far I'm running, I'm at least hitting probably 15 spots. Yeah, and it depends on the size of the spot. Some spots are real big with a lot of ledges. Some are a little pile that requires one or two dives, maybe. Some of them take a little bit of thorough searching, so it just kind of depends.
How does chasing wahoo change the style that you actually fish? I know the difference would be with the gun. You got to put it on a buoy and everything, but how is that different than diving for grouper?
So I'd say the biggest difference, obviously, other than the rigging, the biggest difference is it's more of a sit and wait style hunting. It's almost like a whitetail hunting. You're essentially you're sitting in a tree stand. We're sitting there waiting. We've got flashers going underneath us. Um, some people actively dive up and down and they'll be tossing flashers and stuff. I'm not a big fan of that because when that fish comes in, I want to be ready. I want to have my breath. If I'm coming up from a dive and they come in, I'm kind of screwed because I still have to take time to breathe back up and get ready for the next dive. So the biggest difference is far like hunting style. You're sitting there waiting, and when you do drop, you almost want to meet the fish instead of pursuing the fish. It's not really often a grouper or a snapper is going to come in to meet you. The wahoo, you almost want to meet it instead of swimming at it. Like the reef fish, you have to engage and a lot of times chase and track and follow through rocks and stuff like this. The wahoo, you've kind of got to talk them into it. You got to do your best to be mellow. You almost ignore them while approaching them, if that makes sense. They can kind of feel your intentions.
So you're basically taking advantage of the curiosity.
Yeah, you're trying to. You have a very short window of curiosity, and you're trying to take advantage
Hmm.
of that. That's why a lot of times we use the flashers and we'll chunk cut bait or whatever it is, and you're just trying to distract them and make them realize that you're not trying to get them. Just like anything, just like
Yeah.
any hunting, really.
So when you're chasing the wahoo, I'm assuming you have someone in the boat and they're just drifting along with you in the water beside you.
Yep, boat just stays within. You try to stay within 100 feet or so. It gets a little crazy out there when the wahoo get thick. It's kind of from when I first started doing it. Not that I invented it by any means. These guys have been doing this for years before my time. But with social media and all that stuff, it's gotten a lot more popular. So the boats get a little crammed in certain areas. But yeah, you've got someone up top driving, making sure you're not going to get run over or deal with another boat or divers, and then your buoy diver set next to it, and you pretty much set up current of wherever it is that you want to cover, and you work down whether it's a ledge or a wreck or a rip or whatever it may be, weed line, and you kind of just sit and wait. It's extremely boring right up until it's not.
Yeah, that's how bow hunting is. It's
Yep. That's why
it,
that's why I try to compare it to whitetail hunt. Like sitting in a tree stand, it's the closest thing to it because you're bored as all get out until something happens.
yeah, yeah. That's really funny. That's one of the draws for me. It's like with bow hunting, you may sit in the tree for 40 hours, but when you do have a deer that's within 10 yards of you and you can see it blink and you can see its hair raise on its back, man, there's nothing better.
There's nothing like it. Yep, I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah. So I would assume that one of the challenges of being in your position is you're having success at what you're doing, but at the same time, you want to conserve that. You want to take care of the resource. How are you combating the two intersecting?
Yeah, that's one of the big ones. And like you said, my channel kind of changed a little. If people have noticed or haven't noticed, if you've been from the beginning, you probably watch it change. Um, with anything, the more you expose it, the more it's exposed. That's the reality of it. The more of these things I show to these people, the more they're going to have the opportunity to go and harvest these fish and do these things. And it's been kind of tough for me, especially the commercial side of things, because I really do enjoy it, but at the same time, at what cost is it worth for me to make my bills for that month, and I have to take say 30 groupers. Um, the more I see it, the more it bothers me. And not that there's anything wrong with being a commercial fisherman. People got to eat. It keeps a lot of people employed. I mean, it's just the way of the world. Like we have to harvest animals to eat. And the more I do it, the less I want to do the commercial, the more I want to do charters because it's less impact on the fishery. Um, and it's been kind of a moral dilemma for me because again, I'm getting a little redundant, but it's just the more I show it, the more people are going to be doing it, and the more effect it's going to have on the fishery and the ecosystem as a whole. And I don't know. I'm kind of taking it as it comes. I think if I can show that you can still go out there, have fun, only take what you need, and maybe if I can convince half of the people to do that, maybe it's worth the exposure that I am giving it. So I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go, but it's definitely been tough trying to balance it.
Yeah, I think the emphasis should be more on the experience. Just from my perspective, not that you don't do that, but you got to sell the event, not the fish.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe it's getting older. I don't know what it is, and I'm starting to realize that more. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm above filling the cooler and all that stuff because I did it for years. We did it, especially you go on vacation to this place and you have no fish in your freezer. You want to sink the boat and fish and take it all home and eat it. Luckily, I'm in a position where I don't have to do that. I just go take what I need fresh, and I know that not everyone has that luxury, so I can't expect those people to do that. But say they do have a stellar day, if they say, hey, you know what? We've got enough for the freezer. We're happy. We had a great day. It was a great trip. Let's call it. Like I said, maybe I did do a little bit of good.
What is next for you?
Oh boy. Again, I wish I had a plan. I don't really know. I'm kind of just going and this whole thing from the beginning, ever since, I sold everything and moved down to the Keys, I wish I had this grand master plan. Um, but I really don't know. I want to keep pushing the YouTube because I'm really starting to enjoy that side of it, even down to like the filming and everything. Starting to feel more creative, and I really am enjoying capturing moments that not a lot of people will see. And I'm starting to reach such a broad audience that appreciates it. People that are inland that never even been to the ocean, they're telling me that these videos are making their days, and so I'd like to spend a lot more time with that. Obviously, I have no plans to slow down on the charter business. Well, shut down the charter business. I'm actually throttling back a little on charters to focus on the YouTube. Um, but honestly, no real big plans. I'm trying to slow down a little and enjoy life. I've kind of overpacked my schedule the last couple of years, and I live in such an amazing place and with such amazing people around me. I just kind of want to slow down and enjoy it and continue to share it.
Yeah, what do you think the biggest change was with your channel that helped you start reaching that audience that's maybe in the Midwest or
I think it was
inland?
just, I think it was persistence, honestly. After a certain point, I finally got on a schedule. We were kind of posting episodes every other week, kind of randomly. And I think just like anything, the more YouTube is their fishing hooks. Every video is a hook. So the more I put out there, the more it's going to reach. I was fortunate enough to have some really big YouTubers come down. Kelly Young and Blue Gabe came down and did a couple of videos, and that helped give me a little push. But quite honestly, I think it's just continuing to do it, get out there, and keep posting content. And it was just a matter of time. And like it's any type of social media or anything like that, it's word of mouth, and it kind of catches like wildfire. In the last 3 months, I think it's grown twice as much as we've done in the first 2.5 years. So as of late, it's been really good.
That's great, man. I just from my own experience, I love watching your stuff, man. There's really not many people that do it. So, and you
Loved it.
make it a point to teach, not only show.
Yeah,
And I think
I
that's
love
very important.
I love to hear that because um, I'm so obsessed with learning. I learn stuff every single day. Every episode I make, I learn something, whether it's something big or small. And I've never really considered myself a teacher, but I think maybe it's coming naturally because I am obsessed with learning. So I'm really, really happy to hear that. It makes my day.
Yeah, man. Was there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up here?
No, I'm all good. I appreciate you having me, man. It was a pleasure, and I do appreciate
Yeah, man. Well, anytime you want to talk, we can go into deeper details, but I
it.
can't thank you enough for giving me 40 minutes of your time.
Absolutely, brother. I do appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, man.